today's topic is about cybersecurity, governance, risk, and compliance. I will dive deeper into what this exactly means, and we'll cover a few topics in detail as well. Just before we get started, just wanted to give you a quick introduction about me in terms of my career so far. I completed my bachelor's in 2016, got a Bachelor of Technology in Computer Science, and then moved on to work with PwC as a cybersecurity consultant. After which, I decided to move to the States, pursued my MSIS from Smith School, had a great time there, and then moved on to start working with Yahoo, which was formerly Verizon Media. And then now I'm currently working with Salesforce as a GRC specialist. So in terms of like what my role has been throughout all these companies that I've worked for is essentially in the field of cybersecurity. When it comes to like when I was working back at PwC, it was more about cybersecurity, which included GRC as well as like other cybersecurity domains as well. And then when I moved here and I got my degree from Smith School, I then moved on to Yahoo, where I did more of like GRC specific work, and I kind of liked it, and then I stuck to it, and then continued the same in Salesforce in a different area. Now, before we even take a deep dive into what GRC is, I just wanted to like um, to give a high level overview of what that is. And it's more governance, risk, and compliance is basically a very high level, it's basically a very multi-faceted kind of a domain where you get to do like multiple things. You can be like a coder, you can also be someone who's like, into just security management stuff. There's like you can be technical, non-technical, mid-technical, you can like kind of choose things. So it's kind of a big realm. So I have been like hopping around to doing different things so far, and I will be talking about those in the future slides. So today's agenda would be starting with what cybersecurity is, security best practices, a little bit about privacy, and then how our cybersecurity, how is the cybersecurity architecture set up in different organizations. Then about specifically about GRC, where we will kind of look into third-party risk management and compliance. Basically, R and the C is what we will be focusing on today. And then we will also talk about analytics and GRC, the amalgamation of the two. And then we will be talking about the skills required to do the job, which I guess is most important, especially when we're in school, to know what do we need to get there. So starting with what essentially cybersecurity is in the modern world, I'm sure we're all very well versed of like the different types of attacks and the different types of like different types of security breaches that are happening around us, especially in tech. Being tech professionals, being in the tech industry, we definitely hear of these things a lot. So I won't be diving too deep into like what exactly all these things are. But essentially, cybersecurity as a whole is aimed at preventing cyber attacks, and which is not always successful. Like you cannot always prevent it, it still happens. So the other thing about cybersecurity is to how to control the damage. And all of this involves to understand like when will a security attack happen, or when will any kind of attack happen, how will it happen, uh, how where will it happen, like those kind of things are those kind of questions are something that we try to answer by doing our research, by actually incorporating cybersecurity principles in your organization. You can actually answer these questions in advance. So before we even get into how all of this happens, there are three major security pillars that I would like to talk about: is confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Not giving you too many details about what it is, but just a high level overview of what confidentiality would be is that any sensitive information that I'm sharing with you. So for example, if I have to share something with you and you're the only one who's supposed to receive it, then that needs to be maintained, that data is just exchanged between the two of us, and that's how it will be confidential and no one else can access it. So who's accessing it and how sensitive the data is entails confidentiality. And what essentially a good example of like a breach of confidentiality would be social engineering attacks. You might be getting calls from like different, like from random organizations, even for our SSN, right? You might be just getting a call. Can I get your SSN? And if you give me that, then I can update blah, blah, blah on your profile or whatsoever. That's a very good example of breach of confidentiality. And this happens on an everyday basis. And this is something that not everyone kind of identifies immediately, right? That's where the whole security posture comes in. Talking about integrity, integrity would be anything that if I'm exchanging information with you or any data with you, the way I shared it with you, you should receive it in the same manner. For example, if we are having an email conversation and I sent you something, but you received something entirely else, or you received the same email from me, but it was slightly tweaked. That's a good example of breach of integrity, which is also called an alteration attack. So that's just like a small example to understand like how integrity can be violated. And then comes availability. If you want to access any information, any data, any system at any point in time, you should be able to do that. And if you're not able to do it, that is breach of availability. It could happen for natural reasons as well. For example, there is a network failure, or there is some natural disaster that happened, because of which there's availability issue in terms of power outages and stuff. That's one thing. But another thing would be someone trying to actually stop you from accessing something. That is considered an attack, like a cyber attack on your systems. So a good example of this could be denial of service. Say you want to access Amazon.com and order something, and someone is able to get into your account, get all of your payment information and every confidential information that you have, and that person has access to it. And they are performing an activity right now, and they don't want you to access Amazon.com at the same time. So they will basically trigger a DOS attack, and you won't be able to access that website at all. And that's just like a period in time thing. Just a small example of how you could be restricted to achieve something in the form of a cyber attack by someone who's trying to uh, take information from you, or trying to steal your information. So when we have these are just like some very basic examples, but then there are so many different types of attacks that happen every day. So the main agenda for all the organizations when it comes to cybersecurity is having your information protected, your data protected, and your systems protected. And in fact, also training people for that matter, like I said, the social engineering example. Even everyone should be aware of like the basic security principles that we should follow on an everyday basis. And that's the reason why we need cybersecurity, right? So now, how do organizations actually know what security measure to apply? So there are security best practices, which are like standardized cybersecurity frameworks that are out there. There are some of which are regulated by the government, some of which are regulated by regulatory bodies who are highly focused on, or only focused on, identifying security breaches, and then kind of coming up with solutions to control them. So these are the frameworks that you see here, such as ISO 27001, NIST, SOC, etc. All of these are standard frameworks accepted universally, globally, everywhere, and organizations tend to follow these. And now, how do organizations actually identify which framework to choose on? So this basically depends on what the product is of that organization, or if it not necessarily be a product, it could be a service that the organization is providing. So it's basically catered to your specific needs and what really your business is. And organizations have certain policies and procedures about what their business is, how they're operating, and what do they have in place, and accordingly kind of adapt these frameworks based on what is applicable to them. For example, any company that's dealing with credit card data would make sure that they adapt the PCI framework, which is focused on payment and card industry data. So they will make sure that they have all the security controls mentioned in the PCI framework. Or any company which is working with healthcare data, for example, they need to make sure that they have the HIPAA compliance, which is which is the one mentioned, your HIPAA. So this is about all about patient information, all about healthcare data. So they need to make sure that all the security measures are and the controls that are mentioned in this framework is actually practiced by the organization. Um, we will learn about how all of this is enforced in a few slides from now. So just a little bit, little brief about privacy, where privacy fits into all of this. Often, like cybersecurity and privacy is used in a very confused manner, and people don't really understand where to place what. So just to give you like a brief overview of what privacy is, it's basically focused on data collection and data usage. How is your data collected? How is it processed? How are you handling your data? What are you using that data for? How are you classifying it? Are you sharing your data with someone, with a third party, with another person? If yes, then how are you managing that? So it's essentially focused on data management and like how you can properly handle all of the sensitive information that you have within your organization or for yourself or and whatsoever. So, and the major focus here would be PII, which is personally identifiable information. And the reason being, organizations, there are many organizations who, as part of their product or service, need to store this information to kind of generate profits or to kind of generate basically get their business running. So for that, to protect that data, there are different types of laws, data privacy laws, which kind of are which could be border specific or could be like universal. There are some which are very specific to the country that your business is running, and some of which are very specific to, or some of which are very general into, which is applicable to like all of the data all over. So for example, GDPR, this is governance of data collection for EU residents. So all the GDPR laws, if you're working with any of the EU data, then you have to make sure that you're compliant to GDPR. Or similarly, if you're HIPAA, if you are working with healthcare data, you need to make sure that you're compliant with HIPAA. Now, these laws are enforced and no organization can bypass it. So if you are working with this data, you need to have these compliance done at your end. Um, so just wanted to give you like a brief distinction of what like cybersecurity and privacy is. Cybersecurity essentially would be everything security, and privacy is more related to how data is being handled when it comes to like PII. Moving on, we will talk about cybersecurity architecture in organizations, just to give you an understanding of how an organization would probably place their security domains. Is there would be like a security engineering section, for example, where there will be there the focus would be on like application security, cloud security, security architecture, incident management. Now all of this is very specific to, all of this is very varied by organization, and it will be very specific to what kind of business you have, what kind of an organization that is, and based off of that, basically it's identification of what do you need to protect. So that would be one aspect of security domain. The other aspect would be governance, risk, and compliance, which is what we will be talking about, where governance where governance is all about how you're trying to make sure when you're actually setting up all your processes and your systems and everything, what is the strategy there. Risk management is something that you want to make sure that the risk is minimal, and compliance is all about making sure that you are kind of aligned to what the regulatory bodies are saying. We'll learn about this a little more ahead. So talking about governance, like I said, this is about aligning IT objectives and operations with your organizational or your business objectives. So say my business is, for example, I am selling candles online. So if I'm selling candles online, what would I have in terms of my IT setup? I would have servers, I would have, and it's a very small business, I would say have like 5 to 6 servers or whatsoever. I will have the payment information. I will be basically having a payment gateway through which the transactions would happen, and so on and so forth. Like so many aspects of IT that I would kind of understand that I have, and based off of that, decide what security features I need to have. So governance is essentially planning of all of those things. It should align with your business objectives. Whatever IT objectives that you're building should be aligning to your business objectives. Moving on to risk management, this is basically whatever assets you have and whatever assets you're trying to protect. It's all at risk because you're using them. Like it's a simple thing. It's you're using them, it is at risk. Anyone can breach it if you don't make sure that you have the right controls in place. So to just understand what aspects of risk management you need to take care of, or just to understand what these terms even mean. There are basically four things that you need to look for. What is a threat? What is a vulnerability? What is the risk? And what is a control? When it comes to, so I'll just give you like a very basic analogy to make you understand. Suppose you're in a forest. You're in a forest where there are wild animals. The threat here would be that you can be attacked by these animals. The vulnerability here would be you yourself, because the fact that you are prone to being attacked. Since you are a human and it's a wild animal, quite possibly you will be attacked, or there's a great probability there, right? So that is your vulnerability, that you yourself is the vulnerability here. And the risk is that you can get serious injuries or potentially even like die. And what would be the control here? So the control here would be that you can look at it at two ways. One way is not going to that forest altogether because there's clearly danger out there. Or the second thing would be that, okay, if I'm going in, I want to make sure I follow all the rules. I want to make sure whatever the guidance there is given out by the national park or the forest or whatever, that, okay, you need to follow these guidelines, make sure you do this, you don't do this, don't go here at this hour. If I follow all of those, then I should be okay. So that's a control. So in terms like translating it back to tech or to everything when it comes to systems and data, risk is risk of a cyber attack is always there. What we do at our end is implement controls or implement safety features in layman's language to kind of save ourselves or protect ourselves from the cyber attacks. So whenever you're talking about risk management, like risk and control are the two terms that you will hear a lot. And just one is a problem, the other is a solution, like if you think about it in a broader sense. And when it comes to risk management, you can also look at it in two ways. There is organizational risk management, and then there is third party risk management. Now, what are these things? When it comes to organizational risk management is, I'm an owner of a small business. I have some tech assets that I need to take care of. I need to make sure that I have the controls in place to protect my systems and data. If I do have that, then I mean, me figuring it out for the systems and data that I have, that I am working on, is organizational risk management. Whereas if I am collaborating with, say, Shreyas, for example, who owns another small business and he's working with me, um, I need to make sure that even he is protected. Like his organization as well has the security features that I have, or if not the same, at least some security features that if I share some data with him, it won't get, that data won't be misused. So if I want to be sure that even Shreyas is incorporating security measures, that's third party risk management. So I will be like, hey Shreyas, have you taken care of all the potential risks in your organization? If he gives a thumbs up, that's when I will be working with him. So that's essentially, a high level version of what third party risk management is, which we will kind of take a deep dive in the next slide. And then moving on to compliance, this is basically conformance to business objectives and security best practices. So when I am working with Shreyas, I have some security certifications, like I was talking about those security frameworks right earlier. So those frameworks, I need to prove that I abide by those frameworks, and that is proven by me being compliant in the form of obtaining security certifications or security reports. And how do we do that is something that we will cover later on. But I have those security certifications with me, and I will be asking Shreyas, hey, do you have these security certifications with you? If yes, that's only then I will be working with you. So this is something sort of like an enforcement that every organization has to have. Whatever kind of data, whatever kind of business that you have, you need to have the security certifications that are applicable to your organization or applicable to your business. If you don't have those, people, the other organizations will not work with you because we don't know if you're secure or not. So this is a way to kind of ensuring that the party you're working with is in fact secure. So we will be talking about, like in this slide, I was talking about risk management. We will be talking about third-party risk management in a little detail, followed by compliance in a little detail. So third-party risk management, we identify, so the steps in basically how we go about this is first identifying the third parties. So for example, I identified Shreyas as someone I would like to work with. Sorry to call you out, Shreyas. Yeah, so he will be the one, the third party that I would like to work with. So I will identify that, and then I will determine how I'm collaborating with him. On what basis are we, what kind of collaboration do we have? So for example, let's say we're exchanging personal information in the sense that I am sharing my customer information with Shreyas. If I am doing so, I need to identify what are uh, I need to basically understand what are the risks that are there for my particular data, for my customer data. I need to know what my risks are associated with my organization, right? Then I will go on and conduct a third-party risk assessment where I will send out security questionnaires, security attestation to Shreyas, and he will be giving me a list of security. He will be giving me a list of security certifications that he has, and then I'll ask him more questions about, okay, how do you protect your data? What do you do with your data? So on and so forth. Like that's like a long, extensive process that we go through. Once that is done, I will perform an analysis to identify the risks. Basically, I will see how his security org is set up, and then I will compare it with mine. And I will see if it is meeting my standards or not, my organization's security standards or not. This is also a complicated process where we kind of do a calculation of risk using the formula that I've shown here. It's too much detail. I don't want to get into it, but just wanted to kind of, give you an idea of how it's done. Um, and then we kind of get the outcomes for these risk levels that we calculate do. So qualitative or quantitative outcomes. So I will say, like, working with Shreyas, how much of a risk is it? Like, is it a critical risk, a medium risk, a low risk, or whatsoever, depending on all the calculations that I did, and then make a decision about how I will, if I will be working with him or not. Um, uh, and now in cases like where we and Trace and I are exchanging customer information, the potential areas that I would probably assess is, okay, if he's using a cloud platform, then how is his cloud security? If we are exchanging data, so how is his data security posture? Access management, risk management, privacy, SLAs. Like these are all very security specific terms. Again, don't want to ambush you guys with this, but just to give you an idea of how it looks like. And the next part would be developing a risk treatment strategy. So now this could also go two ways. For example, if Shreyas's organization, security organization, is kind of at a good place, but just needs a little more, like I need them to kind of do one more thing and then I can work with them. So I will come up with a risk strategy and then send this risk strategy to them. Can we mitigate this risk? Can we transfer this risk? Can we accept this risk? I will basically go through this whole process of learning, unlearning, trying to see if we can get something implemented at Shreyas's end if we need to, so that we can actually move forward with the business. And there could be a worst case scenario where, okay, clearly there's a lot of security gap here and we won't be working together and I work with someone else. which in most cases, it's not very common. It's mostly like where the risk here is kind of taken care of, in the sense the two organizations come to a truce where the organization in question kind of makes sure that they are implementing the security, the security posture that we want them to, just so that we can actually do the business, because everyone wants to do business and grow profits, right? Um, so this is just a very high level way of how risk management is done, and specifically third party risk management. Uh, so moving on to compliance now, this is where your preparedness comes in. Every organization needs to be prepared, needs to have these security certifications with them, need to abide by the security standards, and this is enforced by government regulatory bodies, by industry standards, and also by third party requirements. So every organization must adhere to these. So when they do, it kind of helps in preventing security breaches. It minimizes the risk of cyber threats, and at the same time, it minimizes risk of penalties and preserves reputation. So, like in the previous example that I gave, Shreyas's organization is pretty good at security. They have all the certifications, so that means they have a good reputation, and I will be willing to work with them. Whereas if my organization, for example, fails to abide by one of the security certifications that I was supposed to have, I should be paying up to the I will have a penalty to pay. And these are also kind of listed out in the frameworks that we were talking about earlier. So in order to avoid all of these, organizations have to, must, and definitely make sure that they are compliant to security certifications. Just a high level overview of how an organization uh, comes to a point of compliance. The steps here is basically adaptation. First step is adaptation, which is adaptation of compliance frameworks. Like I said earlier, identifying which framework works best for their organization. It could be multiple, and in most cases, it's multiple. Um, the next step would be auditing, which is conducting internal and security audits. Now, when external security audits are conducted, basically there is an external auditor, a third party company which kinds of comes and audits your organization. They say that, okay, I want to check how secure you are, and are you actually doing what you're saying that you're doing. So that is basically tested in the form of audits, and the outcome of the external security audit would be the certification. So it's not like I can self-certify that, okay, my organization is secure. I can't do that. I need to have another organization coming in, testing everything out, and then saying, okay, they're secure. We're giving them this certification. So that's step two. And then step three would be monitoring, which is basically continuously monitor your processes, your system, for changes. For example, if I made a major change in my system or in my organization, where I included, like, say, more servers, or I added like some new technology altogether, then I need to make sure that I have a tap of that, and I am also doing something about the security of that aspect of the new changes that I brought in. And secondly, monitoring the security mechanisms, where say I need to monitor who is accessing my system. So I should be monitoring that all the time. And if I see that, okay, some XYZ person is accessing my system, and that person is not supposed to, how do I know that? I need to be alerted about it. So that's like incorporating automated mechanisms, security mechanisms, to kind of always have some monitoring going on for all your critical assets. So this is again very, very high level. A lot goes into all of this. These steps are quite high level right out there, but just to understand, like, how a big organization or a small organization also whatsoever needs to kind of do to be compliant. So moving on from here, let's talk about analytics and GRC. Basically, everything that we spoke about, I know I spoke a lot about risk management, compliance, and stuff like that. How does analytics come into picture? Um, I think one good example would be, in terms of when it comes to risk management, would be risk classification. Um, the fact that we have imagine a large organization with so many systems, so many data, so many different things going on at the back end, and we have so many security mechanisms set up for it. You're tracking all of it, monitoring all of it, but how do you know where how do you know that someone breached a data, say in system X, or someone copied some data from computer Y or whatever? Like, there are so many things going on. How do we know about these things? We have those monitoring systems in place, and we have different security mechanisms in place to give us that data. From that data, there can be different types of risks that we can identify. For example, I see that, okay, there is one network port which is kind of open, and then anyone who's accessing the internet and has access to has the link to my website can actually come in and take this data away from me. That's one risk, that the network port is open. The other risk is that, okay, I shared this information with company A, and company A is not at all secure. They have our data out in the open. That's risk B. So there's so many different types of things happening around. So amalgamating all of this data using analytics and trying to classify these risks and understand what's going on, someone has to look at a dashboard and actually say that, okay, here's the problem, we need to kind of find a solution for that. So this is in a very broader sense. Like, there are organizations doing risk classification in a very minimalistic way. There are organizations which do risk classification in a very detailed manner. So it all depends on what kind of security setup do you have at your organization. But definitely, this is a very good place where analytics comes into the picture. Like, we always want to know what is the type of risk and how to address it. And the other aspect of it is risk reporting. Again, many aspects to this. What is the type of risk? Where did the risk come originated from? What how can this risk impact the organization or our customers? What kind of controls do we need for this risk? So all types of information associated with that risk can be also done through analytics, in a very detailed way, where you can actually make quick decisions. Leadership does not have time to kind of go and dig into, okay, why did this happen? They just need to look at a dashboard and they need to say, okay, we see these two problem areas, we need to come up with an immediate solution about that. So that's essentially where analytics comes into picture. Similarly, for compliance, audit reporting is one thing where analytics plays a major role, where you can give an entire picture of how an audit is going through data, through basically representing your data, um, and generating insights from that, and identifying, okay, how the audit process is going, what are the problems that we're encountering, are there any audit findings that we need to work on. All these questions can be answered using, that data visualization that you're working on. And the other major thing is identifying anomalies in data. So the external third party that's coming in to kind of perform an audit on your organization, we are giving them tons of data to kind of look through problems, right? Because they want to know if we are actually doing what we're doing. So we'll give them a list of data, and then they will have to find an anomaly, and their job is to find an anomaly actually. So that's a major implementation of analytics when it comes to the compliance aspect of things. So yeah, these are just like brief examples of like how we can use analytics. There is definitely more to analytics and GRC together, but I think these are the main focus areas from what I have experienced so far. And then just wanted to walk you through the different GRC tools and applications out there. You might have heard of some of these, you might have not heard about some of these. They're quite very specific to GRC, but they also have great analytics features within them. So you may not always need to like, connect this particular tool to some analytics tool necessarily. Some of them have inbuilt analytics stuff going on. Some of them actually need you need to kind of connect it to an analytics tool. But these are things out there. If you're interested, you can like kind of research about these tools and applications. They're all over the internet to learn about. And one such example, just to kind of give you a feel of how it looks, this is a tool called OneTrust, where the use case here is, again, third-party risk management, the one that we spoke about. It's just basically a feel of how the UI, how the third-party risk management workflow is set up. It has like these different phases of what we're doing with the risk, identifying it, evaluating it, doing a risk treatment, risk monitoring. You can see the list of risks out there, just to give you a feel of how it looks like. And then you can see the dashboard here. This dashboard kind of gives you an idea of like how a risk management team can use this information to make decisions about their next steps, about what controls to implement. So you can see what kind of third parties, you can see the vendors by risk level, you can see vendors with expiring contracts, vendors by type, vendors by rating, just information that you can actually look at and kind of make decisions. And then one of the other tools is RSA Archer. This dashboard here that you can see is mostly focused on incident management, where, say for example, I left my laptop in a Starbucks and I left it open. I did not have a password protection on it. Some random person is accessing my laptop now. That's an incident that happened. How are we managing that incident? All of the information about incidents of all kinds are kind of managed in this dashboard, and this is actually very helpful because this is like real time. These kind of incidents need to be curbed in real time. You don't have time. These are like something that you need to kind of work on immediately. So someone, like, there's a full-time job for someone actually looking at this dashboard and just responding to it ASAP and kind of making sure that whatever incident happened does not really escalate further and dies down after a point based on whatever solution they provide. So again, a good example of how you can use analytics to in the GRC space. And then moving on to the last segment, which is what skills are companies looking for in candidates. So talking about technical skills, you should be, if it comes to like GRC specifically, when it comes to like governance, risk, and compliance, you should be able to read code, if not write it. Something, I mean, this is not, I think this skill is very essential where you should be able to know, you should know what a coding, like it could be any coding language, depends on like what organization you're working for and stuff like that. But whatever coding language you are working on, you should know what that line of code means, what can it do. You need to have that basic information uh, in your head to be able to kind of actually perform your daily tasks when it even comes to identifying the risk, or even comes to when it comes to compliance activities, like even for your audit activities. For example, in an audit process, you want to see how a security mechanism is implemented. It's obviously written in a code, and it's implemented in a particular way. So where in that code line of code can you see the security part which is coded? Like that's something super basic that um, needs to be done. So yeah, if you don't want to write it, but you should at least know how to read it. Um, you should have some language knowledge of databases as well. Cloud technology is, I think, a big plus in today's world. Everything is on cloud mostly, if not all. But AWS, Azure, GCP, these are the like big players. Definitely helpful to know information about these. And also, if you want to get into this field particularly, it's good to have like cybersecurity concepts and frameworks knowledge. Need not necessarily need to have like, okay, I am CISA certified or CISSP certified and stuff like that, because those are like super expensive certifications, to say the least, which mostly if you work for an organization, they'll help you achieve that. But then you need to have like some basic courses done. There are several websites out there. Like ISACA is one organization which is focused on cybersecurity. So you can definitely go through and see the free courses out there, or courses that you think are basic enough for you to kind of take. You can look through it and get these concepts and frameworks in. again, MS Office, G Suite, everyone uses it every day. I'm sure this doesn't need to be a pointer anyway, but yeah, we all need to have this in our toolkit. Then comes data visualization tools. Great to have Tableau, Looker, Power BI, any of these. There's nothing specific that you think, okay, I need to know Power BI and not Tableau. There's no such thing, but definitely need to have knowledge of some of these or one of these tools at least, so that when you're working with a new tool, it's very easy to adapt and kind of implement things, because every organization definitely uses a different tool altogether. But if you're looking at an amalgamation of like analytics and GRC specific kind of job, this is a big plus to have. Again, data analysis skills are primary as well, given how compliance, like auditing works and how risk management works. I think that is something that is very handy in our day-to-day job. And different project management tools. Again, this is something not necessarily that you need to know beforehand, but it's always a good to have. Like it just saves time for the organization to be like, okay, I don't have to train you in this particular tool. And then moving on to competencies, it's just about like critical thinking, analytical, problem solving, communication, management. I think these are the ones that stand out to me in the sense that I use it on a daily basis, or I use it more often than not, as in my day-to-day job. And yeah, these are the skill required to get into like the GRC space or the cybersecurity space in general. And I think that's about it for my presentation.